Hi, I'm Tim Johnson. I'm Product Marketing Director at Electric Cloud, and thank you very much for being here. I put this panel together to talk about mainframes. A quick question here: how many people love their mainframe and that's what they're going forward with, and they want to do more DevOps-y stuff with their mainframe? Okay, how many people are actively trying to get off their mainframe? Oh, okay, I'm a little surprised. I was expecting that to be nobody. So, okay, we're going to change our questions up here a little bit. Introducing our panel, Anders Wahlgren, CTO for Electric Cloud. Rosalind Ratcliffe, she is Distinguished Engineer and Chief Architect for DevOps for IBM. We have Chris Nowak, who is a consulting with Q2 Strategies. He's currently on assignment at Bank in New York. And we have Torsten Volk here, who is an industry analyst from EMA. So first question, we're going to throw it down here to Anders.
Oh, sure.
So for trying to get off your mainframe, what's some dumb things to not do?
Well, don't get off it unless you need to.
Okay.
I mean, is there a problem that you're solving by getting off of it, right? I mean, if it's processing 50,000 transactions a second for you, and you don't have a replacement for that, then you probably shouldn't get rid of it.
Okay.
On the other hand, if it's being replaced and you're not utilizing it, and it's just an expensive asset at this point, and you don't want to pay to upgrade it or get the new tooling or train the people, or your people are retiring and you can't replace them, or any of those other problems, then you may have a reason to replace it. But I would say, number one, don't replace it just because it's old technology. I mean, if it works, keep using it.
Yeah, Rosalind wants to grab the mic.
I'll pass the mic over now.
It's not old. Okay, it's the most modern chip we have. Okay, so there are reasons. Perceived old.
I apologize.
There are reasons. So, for example, if you're still running your email system on the mainframe, you probably don't need to do that. There are probably other solutions. But if your business critical system is running there, there's no reason for it not to run there. It provides the transaction performance, it provides the scalability, and if you use a modern DevOps pipeline, then there's no problem with getting people, so stay put. Unless it doesn't make sense. Okay. And I will put that caveat, like email systems or something that's no business value, that's not your critical workload, that you don't really need it for, that it's not serving the purpose, then okay. But if it's serving a purpose, use it for its purpose.
Okay.
Should we ask why those three guys are moving away?
Yeah, I was just going to do that. So you raised your hand about why you're moving away. Can you give us some ideas on why?
Certainly. A couple things. I think, so if you say critical system, so of all the systems that run on the mainframe today, there's maybe only one or two that are that critical. And everything else is there because it's sort of accumulated around the center of the big things. And they tend to have local copies of data, be inefficiently architected, be monolithic. Right? And if I start to peel those things away and do functional things with microservices, it's easier to peel them away somewhere else than it is to peel them away on the mainframe. That's where the talent is, the microservices, and I have other systems that are out there. So I think I'm moving towards a point where maybe that one big thing is all that's left, and I just connect the plumbing to it. I think another thing is licensing and cost model, right? So our structure around how we pay for it is 20 years old, who knows, right? So total cost of ownership maybe isn't in the best spot right now, and I can't control it.
Okay.
So I'm moving off as much as I can, as fast as I can.
Okay. Who else raised their hand? Was you or? Okay. So why are you moving off?
Very similar. I don't know if we're fully moving off of it, but trying to get the workload off of it does not make sense.
Okay, so you're moving some workloads off.
And some more critical systems are being rewritten, so are we going to rewrite them on the mainframe?
Okay, so you're rewriting that. So I think, Chris, you want to jump in here.
I was going to ask, and I think you started to answer it. Is it really you're getting off it all the way, or you're saying we're going to do the right things where they need to be, and where it's still mission critical, it's not off the table as an option?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, so here, I did some assessment. So we talked about this DevOps and like CI/CD and like deploying change. I would say the rate of change of the systems that live on the mainframe right now is slow. And for systems that change rapidly and sort of need that are leveraging the CI/CD, the DevOps, the pipelines, stuff like points where they integrate with the mainframe are kind of pain points. And we're trying to, I mean, so I would say, but yes, I don't think there's not a statement to say, I want a 0 ZOS footprint by 2021 or something.
Okay, so you mentioned something that I think Rosalind probably wants to jump in on here, is the pace of change is much slower on the IBM, and certainly we had one of our...
I'm not saying that's because we're constrained. I'm saying just because those systems aren't changing much.
Right,
It might be
okay.
part of the talent, it might be part of the attitude of the people that support them, it might be the way that they're sort of monolithic and siloed, and when I'm doing cross-functional things and building new things across that, I'm thinking different platforms, right? So I don't know how much effort I want to invest in saying, well, think modern and think mainframe at the same time, right? If we're already sort of moving in that direction, so, I mean.
Okay, so
I think there are a couple of pieces in that I want to kind of pull out. And the first thing is that the mainframe is more than ZOS. So first off, the mainframe runs Linux on Z. It also runs the secure service container. So if you actually want to do Docker in a secure service container, that's running on the Z hardware. If you want to run blockchain, that's running on the Z hardware. So the mainframe does a whole bunch of different things. When you talk about ZOS, it also runs modern languages and modern processes. And so you need really thinking about a Java application that you might deploy somewhere. Maybe the data is there, so maybe you do want to run that Java application on Z. So it's really all about what are you writing, how are you writing it, and where do you need it to run, and what are the qualities of service you need for that thing. If you need it close to the data, high reliability, transaction throughput kinds of things, putting it on Z makes a lot of sense. If you need it running in every little part of the world because you need the data in every little part of the world, then maybe you're not going to run it on. So you need to think about that workload and not think about Z as it's COBOL or PL1. It's any modern language. It just happens to be more secure and more reliable and more stable and more all of the goods.
And more and more and more. I think we picked up on that theme there.
Too heavy to steal, too.
That's right.
Hey, wait a second. If you've seen the latest one, it's a 19-inch rack. It looks just like the small baby Z looks just like any other 19-inch rack.
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to pick up on is you mentioned that things move slowly, and one of our other customers said, yeah, we have mainframe, and we do one a month. And yes, we can do that deployment for you in October next year. But does it have to be that way? And okay, Rosalind, yes, if you have the right tool chain, I'm going to give it Anders a shot at this one.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to ask this question. So of those of you that are using mainframes, how many are using modern languages on the mainframe, no matter what OS and so on? Or is it all COBOL PL1 in the room?
Oh, there's one back there. So they're modern.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many here just found out for the first time that you could actually run modern languages and tooling on the mainframe and didn't already know this? So you've just decided it's not worth it, or for some other reason then? I mean, there are people out there that it's just another node. It's just another, I got to push some bits over here, I got to push some bits over here, I got to send a message there, send a message. I mean, from our perspective, in Electric Flow, not to talk product, but we don't care. Like, I don't care. As long as you give me an IP address and some credentials and a command to send somewhere and a port number, we don't care. Why should anybody else care? So I think it really is all about the tooling. And we have a similar thing with our other product, which is Electric Accelerator, which is a Makefile-based product. It's parallel distributed make. And people come to us all the time and say, people still use make? I'm like, yeah, things that have been around for 40 years are generally pretty fucking useful, right? The things that are not useful, they tend to go away after a year or two, like bad restaurants and so on. So I always find it kind of amusing that it's really about, if I can treat it as just another thing that I deploy to from the orchestration and automation perspective that, that's the hat I wear, then I don't care, and neither really should anybody else. Now, licensing costs and training and quite frankly, I mean, yes, there are, modern languages and those kinds of things, but getting and I'm going to be grossly generalistic here, but getting a millennial to go sit down and write software for a mainframe is, you're going to have to tie him down a little bit and convince him that it's fun,
We'll come back to that
Yeah.
one. I think Torsten wants to jump in here for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, what we are seeing, and tell me if that's the case for you too, but it's about the consolidation of the staff, right, and of the tooling. So if you look at hyper-converged infrastructure, which has, I don't know, 20, 25% market share, and then you have your server platforms, you want to probably reduce the tooling that you also then use and the expertise that you need and the support for the mainframe, right? And that's what we are seeing. And when you look at the show floor, it's actually quite interesting. They have a very nice new IDE for mainframe where you can debug in real time and you see dependency mapping variables, everything looks super cool, and you can turn them into microservices, right, where you can get a RESTful API in front of it. But I need to really ask. I don't have that knowledge. Can the same administrators then, the same developers and the same administrators who would run Node.js or any of those tools, can they run them on the mainframe as well as they can run them on distributed, or do you need a separate group of people to do that?
So most of the tools and such can use the same people, same tool. So if it's Node, it's Node. It's the same tools. If it's so, those are the same kinds of things. If it's Linux, then it's Linux is Linux is Linux, and it doesn't matter. For ZOS, you still need some number of ZOS system programmers today, though most of the data can be fed through common data provider to Splunk so take your choice. You can use modern tools as well. In the end, you'll need a few system programmers, but I can bet, based on what I've seen in the world, the number of system programmers required for a mainframe that does billions of transactions is significantly lower than the number of system programmers you probably have to maintain your Windows or Docker or anything else. So you need very few. You still need a few. We haven't gotten all of the tools down to 0, as in different. But most of the tools are the same. Most of the skills are the same that you need in this environment. So it's not that different. There are some, Kix system programmer, IMS, some of those, but mostly it's very few.
Okay. So I used to work at a company that you may have heard of that does search. I won't name them. But my first experience, not Yahoo. My first experience there was I walked in and I looked around and I thought, can of shoe polish, anybody? Anybody ever walk on a raised floor? And yes.
Okay. I worked in the financial market for more than 20 years, and I saw many guys breaking the face trying to downsize from the mainframe the core systems. But looking for DevOps and looking for the future, I had some doubts, like the costs of the license, etc. And if you have some experience to create some more environments like development, QA, put the shift left practices of quality, and how do you can make a blue-green deployment to reduce the downtime in the deployment? This is my big doubt about mainframe and DevOps. I don't know if it's clear.
Okay, all right, so
let me start with the last.
Let me repeat what I think the question is so that everybody could hear. So you've seen a lot of people try and fail at getting off the mainframe, and that one thing that a component that would be critical for you is blue-green deployment capabilities. Is that okay?
Deployment capabilities and the shift left process from QA
and
the user acceptance.
Okay, and shifting everything left as much as you can, right? Okay, all right. So
the couple of things. One, the mainframe has been designed for I don't know how many years to be 100% available. So VisaNet has been up for, I don't know how many years, but it's more than 12 and it's never been down. So there's nothing about Z that says you have to come down to do an update. You can roll the system, you can keep everything up and running, so that's not an issue. It might be an application problem. It's probably more likely a deployment problem or a historical problem. We always IPL on X date, so we're going to do it. There's no reason for any of that. You can stay up. First. Second, Z is just another environment. You can create baby Z environments just as easily as I can create other systems. In fact, you can run ZOS in Intel Linux. We have technology that allows you to do that. So you can cloud provision a ZOS system, and so you can do your unit testing. You can do each level. You could also use ZVM, the VM that existed first, virtual machine, the thing we have. You could use ZVM and provision them on Z hardware, or you can even do them in existing LPARs. So there are multiple ways to do that, and actually I did a DOES talk in 2015 that is recorded that you can go out and see all about the automated testing and shift left and the fact that you can do it. So there are all sorts of answers. There's nothing about the way distributed development works today, shift left, none of those practices don't apply to ZOS. And they can work just as well with COBOL as with anything else.
And I think for me, it's kind of similar to when I hear people talk about, we do firmware, so we can't do DevOps. Our stuff gets burned into a chip, and we can't possibly do DevOps. Well, that's BS too, right? I mean, it's the same thing. You emulate, you simulate, all of those kinds of things. There's always a way to do it, and it's a little bit of a cop-out to say, well, because we're X, Y, and we're the duck-billed platypus. We can't possibly automate, or we can't orchestrate, or we can't do unit testing, or we can't do these kinds of things. I think there's always a way. Is it technically feasible? Is it financially feasible? Is it temporally feasible? All of those things. Those are different discussions, obviously. But there's no laws of physics that says it can't be done. So.
And I'll amplify that. I did this in banks for about 20 years, well, the DevOps pieces for maybe 10 years, and it's always that. We're like, well, we can't do this. My application's special. I go, I know your application's special. Let's take a look at it. And at the end of the day, I'd always say it doesn't matter to me. It's just another IP address. And you can do all of those things that you need to do if you just recognize that. Now, the one thing you do need is a deterministic process, because if it's all over the place, you can't automate something that's random. So if you have the process and it's deterministic and you have a target IP and a port and those things that you need from a networking perspective, it can be done.
Okay, so, all right, good. So I want to get back to the point I was going towards is that, you mentioned millennials and so forth, and I tell my kids about, actually sat and typed COBOL code on a card reader, and they like, that's when dirt was young, Dad, So how do you get people interested in being mainframey and things like that? Is that a challenge that you folks have? That trying to get people interested that no, this thing actually does work and it's valuable and it's cool and things like that. So, okay, yeah. Okay, so the question is, can you spin up containers, microservices, all that current magic that everybody's really excited about? Can you do that on the mainframe? Is that the short question? Okay.
So there are two halves to that, two answers. One, if you're really using containers, Linux on Z runs just fine and works, in fact, scales up better depending on the workload you want to do. It can scale up instead of scale out, and so you can do larger processing, and there's a YouTube video about processing data in a way on a scale-up system. So you can do that. It's all there. It's all available. If we're talking about ZOS, it is built for being able to do lots of transactions at once on the system in a reliable manner. So it's been doing billions of transactions on a regular basis. So yes, it's built for that. Yes, it can do that. The problem is, let's step back to development. People say Z can't do parallel development. Yeah, great. That's because we've been on old library managers that are built based on a structure of waterfall development that assume that. So how about let's use modern tools? So use Git branches, have your own isolated environment, and do development exactly the same way you do everywhere else. And then parallel development's just fine. So there's no issue there. So all of the barriers that are in your way or thought about Z are old processes. They're old thoughts. They're, it's been this way forever. You're right, except the Z has moved on, so let's move our practices on.
Okay, so I think you mentioned something about you got hidebound old guys doing it the old way, and what we've heard from questions and so forth is it sounds more like an education issue here than anything else. And a cultural issue. You're talking to millennials and you say COBOL. What is that? My granddad wrote COBOL and things like that. So how do we overcome that? Is there a SonarQube plugin for COBOL? Yes. Okay.
Yes. Oh. I mean, seriously, yes.
Well, I'm going to ask the question, right? So forget about Mainframe for a minute. As you've all gone through DevOps journeys, and I'm assuming that you're more than day zero on these things, you're here. Haven't you resolved these problems already? You're like, well, if there's this technology, it's Java, it's .NET, it's whatever. You've done these things. You've said, all right, let's collapse these things to common processes and common tools where it makes sense. Why is the Mainframe any different? Why? And go ahead, right? Culture and people.
So it's culture and people. The people that have been there have been doing it for a long time. But when you're talking about getting kids on the platform, how about when they come in and they're new kids and they're working, you don't start with a sentence that Z's going away, so this job's going to go away. Or how about you don't start with, that part doesn't matter, or we're going to do the fun stuff over here. How about the sentence that, and one company uses this, the work that you're going to do on this system runs the world. You're running the major banking system. You're running the credit card system. You're processing all the transactions for, or you're running the airline. All of those are true statements. So instead of doing the negative about what they're working on, do the positive about what they're working on. It's real value. It's running the businesses. Explain that. And then kids might have a problem with ISPF, okay. But kids don't have a problem with building stuff for Z. They have a problem with old tools and practices.
Okay. Torsten, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, from what we see in our research, it's really all about integration, which costs money, right? And education, that also costs money, and tooling, that again costs money. And it's a consolidation thing where we have a lot of data that basically shows that, and hopefully you guys can confirm that too, that from a multi-cloud management perspective, from a data center management perspective, it's all about squeezing cost out of the OpEx, right? Getting the OpEx as low as possible, and adding another technology by definition is the feedback that we often get is not in the books, and I'm so hesitant, which I usually am not for people who know me, but it's not it shouldn't really be a cultural problem, because the 4 nines we were talking about, does the Mainframe have 4 nines on site or 6? I don't know, but you know how many 5 nines. Okay, and I know you need in distributed infrastructure, right? You need to build a hell of a lot of a system that's also not that easy to build over multiple sites to get the same number of 9s, right? So that's what I'm saying. As an industry analyst, there's a couple of things that I don't fully always grasp from a ROI and from a tech perspective, because it looks like a good proposition, but it may just, IBM may not be spending enough money on the marketing. I don't know.
Okay, we got Paul here from CompuWare.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share. I think a beacon to all this, a lot of the companies speaking this week here, and I think of like American Express, ABN AMRO, Lloyds, Lincoln Financial, they all saw these as opportunities. They were mainframe companies. They've incorporated their DevOps initiatives and brought the mainframe into that. So we're seeing great things happen. So I would suggest for those of you that are just looking for, how can you do it? You look to leaders like American Express, ABN AMRO, Lloyds, Lincoln Financial, because they're doing it, and it's been pretty cool to see in the mainframe space.
Okay, so we got 4 minutes left. I want to ask a question here and maybe incorporate what's preventing you from being more successful with your mainframes right now?
The comment real quick I wanted to make is I work for AARP. Our core business runs on mainframe. There are lots of design patterns you can use to actually modernize. For lack of a better word, that as a strategy works much better than talking about re-engineering into a modern system. If you were building a system from scratch, the difference is vertical scaling and horizontal scaling, and we can have more discussion. I think that's the point the gentleman was making at the back. It was less about the tools, the answer was around tools, but more about how can I build horizontal scale databases that modern systems will use.
And just to add to that, right? Because we're the same company, right? They're on the mainframe, we're on the web services side that calls the mainframe for a lot of processing. But it's so much easier for us to implement DevOps on our middleware because of the tools that are available, because of the number of people that's doing it, where we can do additional research. We feel like if we do it on the mainframe, besides the companies that we mentioned, we almost feel like we'll be one of the pioneers, right? Not having a lot of help on the forefront. Just as when we implemented CWS on the mainframe as an example, so we can call them from our Java codes. We felt like we're one of the first, probably.
I think one of the problems is in the mainframe space, people are quieter about what they do. And so I'll say you're not one of the first. People are just quiet, and we need more of the mainframe customers to stand up and explain externally what they're doing.
So the call for papers for DevOps Enterprise Summit 2019 is going out very, very shortly. So we got one more back in the back there.
I think the problem is, I love mainframes. I come from mainframe world, but the trend is you are not embracing change or moving with the technology if you advocate going to mainframe. Now, I know somebody talked about American Express. We are migrating en masse from mainframe to distribution. Now, the problem is we have these systems that are built in the 90s, and the structure is different, right? They were monolithic solutions, so entire mainframe gets a bad rep rather than solving the problem. They start throwing the baby out with the water. That's the problem. And I think, I don't know if one of the panelists is IBM or not, they need to do a better job in articulating the amount of money that's spent on support, all these distributed issues, your network, everything works on mainframe. I was talking to Satish here. Only thing you can screw up most of the time is your application is at fault. Mainframe.
Okay, thank you.
But I won't say that in my company.
Okay. All right, one more here.
We work for the same company, so I just want to
Oh, yes.
This is a 5-year journey. And for 4 years, most of the vendors talked about distributors. That was an easy place to play. All the new products came out. Okay, my conversation always with the vendor is, what do you do on the mainframe? Yeah, you get the deer in headlights. You say, what about DB2? This is running away. This is new. This opportunity for mainframe to be treated in the same way is a new conversation. And it's because mainframe is so stable, we've not had to have the conversation. Now we've beat the crap out of distributed. Now there's the opportunity. So I think it's timing. I don't think it's anything other than people now suddenly see there's value. We can sell you products, and you can start to move into the space.
Okay, great, thank you. Anders, you want to close it out?
Yeah, one thing I was going to say is sort of, there is an old saying, those who don't understand Unix are doomed to re-implement it again and again poorly, right? There's a lot of lessons to be learned from mainframe architecture, and I think it's a good observation that I bet you people who have problems moving their apps off of mainframes would have the same problem moving that same app out of, WebSphere running on Linux because it's a monolith and probably maybe not architected right to be able to put it into microservices and all of those kinds of things. And so, you are throwing out the baby with the bathwater a little bit if you, kind of tar the mainframe with the monolith brush, if you will, right? And I think you have to understand that. And I think, you know, there's a lot of rude awakenings that are going to happen for everybody that thinks they can just lift and shift everything into cloud without being a little bit cloud native, right? That doesn't work either. It does not compute. And then one last thing I wanted to say is I think there is a little bit of education missing here, right? I think one of the things that, that I lacked in my education many years ago is this notion of, look, you're going to walk into a lot of situation where there's history, there's culture, there's technology. Not all of it can be replaced. Most of it shouldn't be replaced. And you have to work in those constraints. And that's, you know, that's something that people have to understand from an engineering perspective, right? Good and bad. And I think there's a lot of just sort of, oh, well, let's just rewrite it in the coolest new thing, whatever that is. And I think there has to be a little bit of perspective on the trade-offs of all of those things. And I think education is part of it. And if we're not educating our, you know, our computer scientists these days to understand that there's this hardware and there's that hardware and there's this type of thing and that type of thing, you know, I think we're doing them a disservice. For sure.
Also didn't make workloads mobile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, you know, service-oriented architectures, and you know, there's a bazillion different things that we've tried where, you know, we end up blaming the technology when really it was probably mostly application architectures that are to blame for the problems, honestly.
And to step away from technology, think about it from the business perspective, right? What problem are you really trying to solve? Do you need, you know, sub-second or millisecond transaction times? I mean, how cool would it be to detect fraud in real time? That's interesting. What about social media? How do you, you know, get ahead of your competition because your mobile is connected directly to the mainframe through an API? That's kind of cool, right? Print up those big iron T-shirts and pass them out.
This is another tool in the toolbox.
So, go ahead. Any other comments? Okay, so I think a couple of takeaways. Next year, this is going to be a town hall, so you guys can ask more questions. 2, I think we're going to put together some kind of secret society pin or something that, hey, I'm a mainframer, you know. And
Public society.
Right.
Everybody needs to see we're
Right.
proud of
Everybody who has a 15-pound laptop is a mainframe.
That's true.
Well,
That's
my
true.
laptop can be a mainframe. Yes, you're right.
So I've had fun. Has this been valuable for you folks? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. It's break time. Enjoy.